Let's talk about art for our projects. Hello everyone, this is Ali Reza. Welcome to the Mentor Code Lab. Today we will talk about how we can get art for our blocks, for our assets, and how we can utilize something like Photoshop to take already existing assets and get our own unique textures for our mod. Remember, we have tons of mods out there that are using resources. However, most of the time, it's a very bad practice to just copy and paste them inside your own mod and call it a day. However, if you have something like Photoshop, you can tweak these textures. This is a texture from Ender.io. Some of these textures are 16 by 16 and some, like this one, is 32 by 32. Again, this is a texture from Ender.io. If I copy it and paste it on top of this guy and change the color to something like color dodge, going back, finding the deepest slate cobblestone texture from Minecraft itself, paste it, and then change the color to vivid light and move it around so that it will cover 1/4 of the top, and then duplicate this layer, move it to the side, duplicate these two layers, move them down. You see that we get, and by the way, merge these layers and then move to vivid light. It looks like we don't have anything. But if I zoom back and take a look, it has a texture. However, if I come here and on top of this layer, I add a hue and saturation layer and use the previous layer for clipping mask and then try to tweak the color. Okay, and like so, there we go. Now you get a machine that looks like it's using brakes, isn't it? And let's merge these two again and change the color to color dodge. I can tweak this texture as much as I need, or alternatively, I can just use, adjustments to do that. So I'm adjusting the texture directly without using any layers. And now that I have this layer, I can Control C it, come back here and hit Control V, and then get the cobblestone from Minecraft itself, Control C, Control V, and then remember it's a vivid light, and then move it around again so that it fits the textures, duplicate the layer, move it around, select these two, duplicate, and move around. So suddenly you see that I have a new machine, isn't it? And you will see it, especially if I zoom back a little bit, and that looks like a machine texture. Now this machine has no off state and it's always on state. How can I do the off state? I just copy these few lines of the pixels, Control C on the main picture, Control V, Control T, holding Shift, I rotate it 90 degrees, move it in place, and hit Enter. And then duplicate this layer, move it a little bit higher up so that I will cover that aspect. And now I can turn on all these layers, and suddenly I get a off state of the machine, as you see. So I can just save these two as two different PNG files, and that's it. The other one is this guy. Now, this is a little bit interesting. Let's Control C, Control V, and immediately you see that the blue texture is becoming white. Maybe that's what you want, but I personally prefer to preserve that blue color. So I will select these pixels, cut them, move them on top of this solid color layer, and now I have the blue back. I can find the deepest slate cobblestone, Control C it, and then on top of this blue, I will paste it and I will call it with light again. And now I have this interesting looking of blue light, and I can zoom back so that you can see the machine as it is. So that's the on state again. We have the off state for this machine. So that is how I generated all these machine looks, basically with a different color as the base solid color and then copy paste them and get these machines. However, let's talk about animated texture, and then I will go and talk about items. Animated textures are just your texture being repeated multiple times in a vertical state. The bottom one is index 0, the next one is index 1, 2, 3, etc., etc. Then you have a file that is called with the name of the image, .png, for example, and then .mcmeta. Here we will say, hey, every 2 frames, switch between the animations indexes as I say it. Remember, the bottom one is 0. So we will start with 0, then we go to 1, 2, 3. Then we roll back to 2 and 1 and back to 0. So 0, 1, 2, 3. Then we are not using the top 2. We go 2, 1, and back and forth movement between these textures. However, sometimes you see that, for example, this one has only 2 images, and the MC meta is saying 0, 1. So it goes from 0 to 1, back to 0, back to 1. Basically, it's flip-flopping between these 2 textures. Okay, that's about the machines. For the blocks, you can find tons of block textures online. And if you like something, for example, I like this ruby, I tweak the texture a little bit in Photoshop for getting the different color for the sapphire. And that's again using this hue and saturation tweak. So adjustment, hue and saturation. Now, if your texture is grayscale, like what we have, check mark this colorize, and now you can tweak the color, and you see that I can have different sort of block from just deep slate, cobblestone, and call it whatever I want. However, I prefer in Photoshop to adjust, to add a new layer. And by the way, if you see that the layer adjustment is turned off, check the mode, it's index color, move it to RGB, then you can put the adjust colors. The layers that I use normally is hue saturation, level, curve, and brightness contrast. Most of the time I start with the hue saturation level, so I can just change the hue of something if I need to, for example, like this. And if I need, I will add a new layer on top of it, for example, I don't know, curves. And I decide that, hey, for example, I need less red inside this thing, okay? Provided we don't have that much red there. Or maybe blue. So you see that by tweaking the blue, I'm just changing the texture. And finally, I may add a level layer, and here, let me see, layers, adjustment, level, boom. And I will move it on top. And now I have the ability to darken or lighten the whole texture as one, or sometimes it's fun to look at the negative values, just like that. But most of the time when you use level, you are using it for, lightening or darkening the whole texture as one. And the last one that I sometimes use is the brightness and contrast. Now, brightness is just like level, tweaking the level. However, contrast makes it so that you can make more contrast between your levels, and, you can tweak and play with all of them at once if you need to. And that's something by itself. And that is why I have the layer approach instead of using the adjustment approach, because now I can come back and make a decision that, hey, I want more green and maybe less brightness going back to here. I will tweak it to, for example, have a little bit different look, and I have the freedom there, okay? So that is how you can use even vanilla textures, tweak the looks of that, and get a new block all by itself. Now, for the ingots and items, sometimes you see an item like this somewhere on the web, okay? And it's a mod, and it has some effects around some item. You want that effect to work with your own item. If I paste it right now, you see that the color is fixing itself. However, that's not always the case. If your texture is on RGB mode, if I paste it, it will open a new layer. It will use the base color. So now I have to, again, use this hue saturation and try as hard as I can to mimic the colors. Sometimes it gives a very good result. Sometimes it's not giving a good result. In this case, it did. However, the trick here is to, if you are on RGB, is to move it to indexed color and then paste, but at the same time, without doing anything else, use the arrow key to move your effect around as much as you need to, because the moment you click outside, you will lose that layer, and you see that you don't have any layers here. However, as you see, the coloring comes indexed based on what you have here. Sometimes this is easier and matches the color better. On some items, it's really hard to match your color exactly how you need. Again, if we look into the items, for example, you see that I have gears, diamond, copper, energized, block, and all of these started with the same texture. Sometimes I use parts of this texture to change the color, and sometimes I choose another section to change the color again. All of these are based on the gears that came from Ender.io, and this is, for example, one of them from Ender.io itself, okay? For example, the stone one came from Ender.io again. However, for example, the ruby is the one I tweaked, sapphire I tweaked, emerald, diamond, copper, these are the things that I tweaked. And finally, let's talk about items that are not there in vanilla, and you find something on web. You can still change the colors and use them. Now here is two items. This one was the case without this bluish part. I added it from my ingot, and using Photoshop, I just cut the ingot and fit this part inside the casing. This item was exactly one single item with a color gradient less sharper than this, and I just overlaid the gradient on top of it and played with the blending options in Photoshop and changed it to look like that. Sometimes you find items that are available for you in web without any licensing. Basically, you are free to use them. However, sometimes you can blend different items to get something like this. It is the Yeta wrench from Ender.io, but hey, this is Yeta wrench from Ender.io. So what I did is that I copied an ingot on top of it and removed part of the ingot and changed the blending option, and suddenly the Yeta wrench from Ender.io became my own wrench like this. And these are the tweaks that you can do on any item, wherever you want, whenever you want, and no one is there to stop you. Another tweak that you can do is that you can use, for example, lasso, and you can just do something like this, some freeform manipulation, okay? And then add a color there. I don't know, you choose it. Sharp green, how is that? And this is the blending option. You see the normal? I click on normal and then start scrolling my mouse downward until I see something fun to play with. Hey, wait there. Wait a minute there. And then I will just remove the parts that I don't like, And remember, you shouldn't have transparency anywhere in your object, because you may not see it right now. There is this one single pixel here that is basically semi-transparent. It has green color into it. Minecraft will show a dark, solid green pixel right there and here and maybe here. So whenever you are deleting, make sure that you are cleaning your file as much as possible. So here we go. That Enderite now became a new item all by itself. Maybe you call it something else, I don't know, enhanced Enderite, whatever you want. And how did I do that? I just randomly selected some pixels, randomly selected the color, and I had done it. Basically, now I can select this, I can play with the coloring, and I will just check another color, and boom, a new look into the item. So don't be hesitant. This is why I prefer Photoshop on top of GIMP, and this is why I said Paint.net is not a good application for something like this, because in Paint.net, you don't have any of these flexibilities. GIMP has most of them, but not all of them. Photoshop is really nice because in Photoshop, you have all the freedom that you need to tweak anything that you want, however you want, okay? So I'm just, right now, I'm just playing with colors, and see what I can get. As simple as that. So, for example, this can be a mixed alloy between Enderite and redstone dust, for example. So this gives you ideas, and this gives you some new textures, some new items, and you can always do these sort of tweaks to change the look of stuff as much as you need. The last thing I will show you in this video, and I will finish it, is, for example, this. This is a 32 by 32 texture from Ender.io, and the looks are not exactly what I want. I need half of it. So I will Control-C it. I will paste it, and I will move it to the exact location. I will hit Control-T, and I will move it one or few pixels there, and I will tweak it so that it fits exactly like that. Hit Enter, and making sure that it looks like it's sitting correctly. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't, but in this time it did. So now I will merge these two. Okay, this is an empty filter for me, okay? However, Minecraft itself has some textures, and I want to utilize those textures to put some filtering options on top of these layers. Let's take a look at them. If you remember, in previous videos, I showed you how to use assets from Minecraft, and these are textures that come from Minecraft and textures.gui. Let's take a look at large options and, in the items. And yeah, there are lots of these, but take a look. If I look for empty, or was it blank? Let me find one. There we go, empty. It didn't search, but we have tons of these. So for example, I want to make a filter for items. I can do it, and immediately I will start playing with the blending options, and that's it. As you see, it's a filter for powders, for example, or there we go. It can be a liquid, for example, and I can duplicate this layer to make it more obvious on the filter. So that's a new filter for you. Or another example is to use this as shards, put it there, change it to divide, duplicate it to get a sharper result, and that's your filter. So don't be hesitant on mixing and merging different things from vanilla into a mod that you see out there. Sometimes you see something nice and you want to have it, and for example, have something on top. Don't hesitate, for example, if I do this and I will select this row of pixels, few pixels actually, Control-C them, Control-V, and move it around like so. And now what I'm doing basically is I'm trying to get rid of that blue effect underneath, okay? Like so. Then come back and I will hide one of them, selecting the color. I can turn this on, and selecting the layer, I can paste it, and suddenly I have a new filter all by itself without even blending. It can be normal. And that's it basically. So this is a very useful way of having different textures for your items, for your blocks. On top of these, you still have more flexibility. For example, on custom rendering in the world, And we will take a look at that later down the road in the mod process. And that is another option to put another layer of beautifying things in Minecraft. However, when it comes to custom rendering, you should be a little bit careful to not carry away. If you look at any of the items that I'm using in my mod, you will notice that they are all started from one single texture. And then I put another layer on, for example, for the cast, I put another layer of items. I don't remember. Did I got this one from Tinker's Construct? Yes, the cast was from Tinker Construct. The rod was from Tinker Construct. I moved them on top of each other, selected the rod in Photoshop, selected the layer, then moved another layer down on the cast and deleted, and then discarded the rod layer. So I emptied the casting, and I now have a layer with a transparent object in the middle. Same things happened for ingots, pickaxe head. All of these are being done using multiple layers and tweaking and manipulating the selection, deletion, color manipulation, and stuff like that. And as you see, right now, I have tons of items, and this is just the beginning. If you like these videos, please subscribe to the channel, hit the like button, and turn on that bell so that when I publish a new video, you will get informed. Have fun, everyone. Bye.